All right, so first assessment we're going to look at is overhead flexion. So as I mentioned in the article, we want to try to get them out of their shoes. Thank you. And have the least amount of clothing as possible, of course, context and situationally appropriate. So for overhead flexion, first thing we're going to look at is just kind of a static assessment of where her shoulders sit before she goes into movement. Where are the thumbs, how much distance between elbow and rib cage on either side, what's the level of the collarbone look like, and where's the head of the humerus sit on either side. So for the sake of this, we know Nicole's going to have a pretty good movement pattern. We know that she's pretty comfortable overhead. So I'm going to have her go through her natural pattern, and then we're just going to kind of adjust her and show some things that we normally see here. So once we get our static assessment, make notes of where all of our key landmarks are. I also just like to check resting posture from the waist down as well, because that will affect overhead flexion mechanics. So for her, we can see she's standing in a lock knee pattern. So we want to unlock the knees, tighten the glutes, and then from here, go ahead up into overhead flexion. On the front side, what we're really looking for starts at the rib cage. Do those ribs pull up out of position, or can they stay down and compact while she goes overhead? Second thing we want to look for is the difference between the elbows and the hands. What will happen often with the hands is we'll see this pattern here, where their hands are actually a little bit internally rotated here. Usually this is due to a bound up lat muscle or a little bit of tightness here, kind of inhibiting them from being able to get those thumbs back. So we want to make sure that we have thumbs back. Also make sure that we don't have a break in the elbow. This is another common one that we'll see, so make sure we have extended elbows, thumbs pointed back. From there, we're just going to take a look and see. Go ahead and do it just a couple. What we're looking for optimally here is biceps getting next to ears. We don't have any sign of like forward head posture or protrusion coming forward. Right, this is a really clean pattern. This looks good. Okay. So if we turn her around, now we're going to take a look here, just kind of at we're going to take a look at, again, the static positioning of the superior medial borders of the scapula, the inferior medial borders of the scapula, and specifically how much distance is there between the spine and the scapula. And again, we want to look right to left, see if there's any notable difference. I think a good value to follow on that is like 2 inches from the spine and the inferior medial border, but nevertheless, whatever your metrics are for it, we just want to make sure that we have a reasonable amount of symmetry here between left and right. Next, we're going to look at the relationship between the scapula and the humerus. So scapulohumeral rhythm, we want to see about 2 degrees of glenohumeral movement for every 1 degree of scapular movement. In addition to that, we want to make sure that the starting point is the starting point, or in other words, sometimes we'll see the scapula jump in to come back up. Really, I think of that like starting 5 yards behind the starting mark if you're running a 100-meter dash, right? We don't want to move unnecessarily just for the sake of doing so. So with this, we'll take a look here. I'll place my hands right on the inferior medial border, and then I'll kind of let her take her arm up, and then I just want to kind of track where that scapula finishes at end range flexion. Go back down, and does it return in that same pattern as well? Go ahead and do a couple more. One. Good, so we can see we get good scapular movement here. It seems to be in accordance with the glenohumeral movement, and I would say that this is generally a pretty good pattern. With the scapula, I know Eric Cressy is big on like marking your points. Frankly, I don't get quite that involved, but I do think it's important to make at least a mental note of where these points sit in a resting position, and then also how far they move when we go up into overhead flexion, and just comparing those left to right, and then against theoretical norms. So that's kind of the major key points for overhead flexion.